Siomra
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sherlock. Listen, the podcast that takes a pop at culture. Sherlock, sure listen.
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 Sherlock, sure listen. Oh, very good, Benjamin. You're advertising the podcast exclusively to dolphins again, I see. But sure, look, we don't have time to get into that because we've had some shocking Neil Gaiman news this week. The news is that he's not, in fact, a gay man, and some other stuff, which we'll try to be sensitive about, but maybe won't be. But also, Benjamin, speaking of cringe, we're going to have either a cringe or based episode this week because I've dived into Gen Alpha's first ever contribution to internet meme culture with Skibidi Toilet because I had COVID and I had loads of time. We've both watched the last 2 episodes of The Boys. We didn't talk about it last week because we didn't have time. And Ben, once again, because I had COVID and I had loads of time to hang about the house doing nothing, I watched Abigail and Furiosa before we go on our summer holiday break, so we'll be all caught up on the big movies we missed.
Sure, listen, Michael, if that wasn't enough grim stuff to wade our way through this week.
That's a grim one.
We've also decided to take a look at, come here to me. Why do we write about the future in such horrific ways? What's the deal with that? Is it our society? What are the underlying factors that might influence our forecasting? What's going on?
That's very interesting, Benjamin, because you've straight away taken a negative slant on that topic rather than a negative or positive, and that maybe says something about your attitude towards popular culture. But we'll get to that later. But first of all, great news: Neil Gaiman's in the shit bin.
Look, allegations have surfaced this week, Michael, about Neil Gaiman having... This is a tough one, ladies and gentlemen, because unfortunately in previous episodes of this podcast, I have heavily outlined that one great Neil Gaiman fan am I.
The biggest... Benjamin, move your head there a little bit to the right. Give us a look at your bookshelf. There you go, good man. Oh, yeah. A lot of Neil Gaiman up on there.
There actually
hold
is,
on, Benjamin. I have a voice clip recorded 4 years ago. It's a voice clip of you, Benjamin. Are you ready for me to play it now? I'm going to play it seamlessly on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mick, you know what? Actually, I think that Neil Gaiman could literally do no wrong. No matter what he did, I would, totes support him.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing that I said, and that was definitely a real recording that Mick dug up from our archive from 4 years ago. No, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, some very serious allegations have been brought against Neil Gaiman from 2 women. Both women allege that they were forced to have sex non-consensually with Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman has come out in response to that and said, no, it was consensual. It was just a bit rough. And, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great.
Look, here's the thing. Neil Gaiman, it turns out, is a sex man. Neil Gaiman is a BDSM sex man who likes to have sex with younger women and slap them around a little bit and have them call him master. And that is as... Look, Benjamin, no kink shaming on this podcast.
No,
if that's what you're into. If that's what you're into consensually, up away you go. But that is a recipe for a 63-year-old celebrity to get themselves Me Too'd.
Yeah, look, I think... Look, regardless of whether these allegations are true or not, Michael, his defense of his actions hasn't been great. Well, first of all, it's important to understand who these victims are. One was his nanny for his children, not his nanny. The nanny he had hired for his own children.
Oh, he didn't hire her. His wife hired her.
Okay, his wife hired her, apologies. And the other was an 18-year-old fan. And
21.
21?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. 21-year-old fan, Michael. And look, his defense isn't great. He's come out and said, well, it was consensual. And one of them has delusions all the time.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop you there, Benjamin, for a second. And I would say that, contrary to what you've just said there, it was consensual is actually the greatest defense for this.
Okay, go on. Go on.
Well, I mean, isn't it? Is it not? Is that not the greatest defense for this?
I mean, it's the only defense he has, I suppose.
I think, but all joking aside, is it not literally the only defense that there is?
Is that it was consensual?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Of course, if sex actually occurred and now you're
I think
being
it
accused
definitely.
of it.
So I've actually listened to. Now, I'll admit I haven't listened to the full 4-episode podcast because it only came out the other day and they're long. But what I've heard, it does seem like it was consensual, certainly at the time, and it seems like she pursued him. That's definitely what episode 3 of the podcast makes it sound like. Not that I'm defending what has happened here, but I think the greatest possible defense for Neil Gaiman is it was consensual.
Yeah, so it's probably quite important to note how these accusations came to light, Michael. This is from the Tortoise magazine. It's from Tortoise Media is the name of the company, and the way that they brought this to light is as a Tortoise Investigates piece on Wednesday the 3rd of July 2024. It's just titled Exclusive, Neil Gaiman accused of sexual assault, and it's not what I thought it would be, which is an article detailing the events. It's a 4-part podcast.
Yeah.
Which is very strange. It's called Master, the allegations against Neil Gaiman. And I suppose the curiosity I would have here, Michael, is this is the first we're hearing of these allegations.
Yes.
No criminal proceedings, as far as I'm aware, are being brought forward yet.
Doesn't sound like it.
So they've gone and made essentially a true crime podcast on an unfounded true crime. And I'm not defending this. Look, I think the power dynamics at play there, be it with a fan or with your nanny that you pay and have a job with, there's a complicated power dynamic at play there, and Neil Gaiman shouldn't fucking take advantage of it. Personally, in my opinion, that is my opinion. I think the power dynamics are a bit off. I think it's a weird thing to do. Anyway, I also think it's a weird thing to publish your allegations in the form of a pod.
I think it's undoubted here that Neil Gaiman's a bit of a creeper. It seems almost certain that Neil Gaiman is a bit of a creeper, but it also seems from what I've understood of it that he sought consent and, as far as he was concerned, received it. Now, that doesn't defend him from being a creeper and using the fact that he's a rich, famous 63-year-old celebrity to beat up young women for sexual kicks.
Yeah, it just doesn't, it doesn't track.
It doesn't look great for you.
No.
But what was the but there? No, there's no but.
There's no but there. That's what I mean.
It doesn't look
like,
great.
Look,
but no, there was a but. But is it deserving of an internet witch hunt and to banish him from public discourse? That's the more interesting thing. And I think it is I think an internet witch hunt only worsens society. Now, does it worsen society more than Neil Gaiman, 63-year-old famous celebrity Neil Gaiman, sleeping with 20-year-olds? That is up to personal opinion. Neil Gaiman would no doubt say that every single 20-year-old he's ever slapped around with a belt has wanted it.
Yes. Yeah.
And, he has the texts to prove it, sadly. But an internet witch hunt does no one any good, is my personal opinion on this.
Either way, his wholesome image as the internet's kind of gentle, sensible fantasy author is fucked. That's gone now.
Hi, I'm Neil Gaiman, and this week on BBC Masterclass, I'm going to teach you how not to have rough sex with women from a different generation who have different sexual mores and standards on consent, therefore getting yourself into some right hot water.
I think that what's so funny to me, Michael, is when I first looked up the podcast's Master, the allegations against Neil Gaiman, I thought it was like bonus material for Masterclass because it was Master. I was like, what is this?
Someone in BBC is fucking seething.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're probably going to have a bit of a...
Benjamin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think when Neil Gaiman was recording BBC's Neil Gaiman's masterclass, he got a little bit of a chub every time he said
Oh,
masterclass?
fuck. Fucking hell, Michael.
I bet you he did.
Fucking hell. Look, Neil Gaiman's a creep.
What?
He's possibly done some bad stuff. It's devastating news for me as a fan of Neil Gaiman. I will probably not be screaming that from the rooftops from now on.
I bet you wish you. I bet you're sad you missed your opportunity to tell him that at a convention.
Yeah. He probably would have sent me some WhatsApps afterwards.
I don't know. You probably would have sent him some WhatsApps, and he would have given you his number.
Don't love that, Michael. Anyway, he's a big
Oh,
old
look.
creep. Michael, speaking of creepy things on the internet and young people doing
Go on.
things they probably should have thought more about, what is Skibidi Toilet?
What is Skibidi Toilet, Benjamin? Look, I stumbled down a rabbit hole of YouTube this week, and all rabbit holes on YouTube at the moment lead to the absolutely startling phenomenon that is Skibidi Toilet. Benjamin, are you in any way aware of Skibidi Toilet?
The only thing I am aware of here is a TikTok where I saw a Gen X reporter ask a 5-year-old what it is and why he kept saying it. That's it.
Fabulous.
That's it.
So Skibidi Toilet, Benjamin. In the long-running tradition of Shuluk Listen, the podcast that takes a pop of culture, looking at internet phenomenons like, say, SCPs.
Yes, go on.
Or liminal spaces.
Yeah, creepy places.
Yeah, or creepypastas in general.
Yes.
Like the Slender Man, Benjamin. So, Skibidi Toilet is being hailed as Generation Alpha, Ben. The kids born in the 2010s onwards.
Right.
Now, you might be surprised that there are humans, cognizant humans, who are that young. But there are, and some of them are 14 and 15. And when you're 14 and 15, you start making contributions to pop culture terrifyingly.
Unfortunately, yes.
And Skibidi Toilet, Ben, you've never sounded more like a boomer, Benjamin.
Probably haven't.
Are the young people frightening? You're frightened of the young people now, and you're frightened of old people like Neil Gaiman. Do you only want to be in the kind of... You only want to be hanging around with people 35 to 45?
That's it. That's the window. I
That's
will
it.
stop communicating with you when you cross the threshold of 45. That will be the end of it. I have a decade width around my social activities, and that is what I will do.
Very, very, very good. You and Leonardo DiCaprio. So anyway, Skibidi Toilet is a web series created by a Georgian fella, Benjamin. Georgia, the Russian-speaking part of the world, not the American-speaking
From the country of Georgia.
part of the world. The country of Georgia. And in Skibidi Toilet, Benjamin, there are toilets. And
Oh, yes.
computer-generated heads pop out of these toilets. And they go, skibbity do, yeah, skibbity, yeah, skibbity. And they make horrifying faces. And they glitch out because they're all created using Valve assets, Benjamin. You aware of
Oh,
Valve? Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Valve, the video game creators.
That's
So
your
they're
Steam.
all... Steam, Half-Life, etc. So
Yeah.
all of they're machinima? They're computer
Machinima,
game
I think
animations. Yeah, machinima.
Okay.
Is that not a YouTube site? Anyway, doesn't matter. And the Skibidi Toilets, Benjamin, started as just a weird thing. Like, here's a weird thing. There's a toilet and a head pops out and goes skibbity do, skibbity dop, yeah, skibbity,
Yes.
yeah. And everyone went, oh, that was weird. Show us, let's say, 6 or 7 more hours of that happening. So
Oh.
this creator, who goes by whose YouTube channel goes by the name Da Fuck Boom, he created an entire web series. This is great, Ben. He created an entire web series which revolves around Skibidi Toilets. And Skibidi Toilets are some sort of predatory life form. So they are free-roving toilets that heads pop out of and attack people.
Okay.
And the initial, maybe first 10, 15, 20 Skibidi Toilet clips are heads popping out of toilets in weird places and Skibidi Toilets coming and attacking people in restaurants and doing all sorts of terrifying and spooky things.
Okay.
And it seems like very early in the canon of the Skibidi Toilet series, normal humanity, gets mostly wiped out.
Okay.
But then there's some sort of resistance to the Skibidi toilets in the form of people with electronic appliances for heads, starting with men with cameras for heads. And my personal take on this is that it's based on the meme that the cameraman always survives.
Oh, it's a classic.
That camera, the cameraman survived, or all those memes you used to see where people were filming like surprise videos and the cameraman is standing there really obviously. But these cameramen are men with cameras for heads, and they fight back against the Skibidi toilets, Ben. And the way you defeat a Skibidi toilet is just by beating it up. Or you can pull out its plunger. And when you pull out its plunger, it gets flushed back down the toilet.
I see. So, come here to me. Hang on. Because what I have pictured in my head, let's just take a quick aside here. What I have in my head right now is a mimic-esque toilet from D&D.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Where an unsuspecting soul goes for a 1 or a 2 in a public cubicle.
Okay, well, you don't need to because they're free roving.
So might I be walking down Michael O'Connell Street at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I should probably be very worried if I see a porcelain lavatory making a beeline towards me. I'm probably about to be devoured by a Skibidi-Doo toilet. Is that what's happening?
Not a Skibidi-Doo toilet, Benjamin. You've aged yourself another 10 years there. A Skibidi toilet.
A Skibidi toilet. I'm sorry. My scatting went too far, Michael.
It did, as your scat so often does. Oh no, sorry. I was thinking of Neil Gaiman.
Jesus,
but Benjamin, I've listened to the podcast, man. There's some weird shit going on. What was I saying? You'll also hear it because the Skibidi toilet will be singing Skibidi doo doo, yeah, Skibidi 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 skoo.
And
so you'll hear it coming.
Eat people? Do they pull them down into the toilet?
Yeah.
What is the goal?
They seem to swallow you up. They gobble you up.
Okay. Well, this is awful.
Terrible stuff. Terrible stuff altogether.
But I would say, Michael, in the little time that I've had to dig up a little bit about this while you were chatting to me, I think the moral panic is a little unfounded. Do you not reckon?
Yeah. But this is great. This is the best thing about it. Everyone older than 14 immediately sees this and goes, brain rot. The children's brains are failing. Even, Ben, Gen Z, who are now you got Gen Zers, Ben, who are approaching their mid-20s.
Oh, Michael, the age.
They're catching up. They're catching up, Ben.
We're all getting up.
And they're going, the stuff we were looking at, that was fine and normal. We all loved doing the Bronxton beat. What was that fucking one?
It was... I can't even remember. It was the Harlem Shake.
Harlem Shake, yeah. The Harlem Shake was fine.
You were thinking of the classic 80s song by Bronxky Beat, I think.
Yeah, I was. I got mixed up.
Now who's aged themselves a couple of decades, Sonny Jim?
What's that? What's that, young man? What were you saying? So, the moral panic about this being a brain rot is hilarious. Because this is now easily the most viewed thing on YouTube. It's had something like 47 billion views.
How have I missed this?
Because you're too old. You're too old. You're not down
with
the kids like me,
Ben. That's probably it.
Because you're not going, that 12-year-old just said Skibidi toilet to me. What the fuck does that mean? I'm going to look that up.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm never around 12-year-olds, so they can't actually speak to me.
Sassy little fuckers.
Sassy little shitbags. But
Skibidi toilets.
It just sounds to me, Michael, like Newgrounds or Creepypasta or SCPs in a different form. It reminds me of that entire genre of bizarre Team Fortress 2 content, Michael.
Well, I mean, it even looks like that content because Team Fortress 2 is Val.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember a lot of this kind of thing coming out a couple of years ago. And, well, I'd say it's more years ago now. I'd say my brain is being kind to me and kind of allowing me to forget just how long ago I remember seeing this stuff. But there was, at one point, I remember a bizarre series that was exactly in that absurd, surreal tone of it was two basic kind of render models who were strange detectives, and the narratives and stuff were completely non-sequential. They were bizarre, they were non-linear, they were weird as fuck. And I cannot for the life of me remember what channel this used to be on. It's going to drive me mad now.
Stu is 17 years old, Ben.
Yeah, I'm old as shit, man. I'm old as shit.
Old as shit. But the funny thing about this is Skibidi Toilet does have an ongoing plot. Which is an ever-escalating arms race between the Skibidi Toilets and the appliance people who are fighting them back. And they get bigger and bigger, and they get different technology, and other factions join the fight, and it's dialogueless. It's not silent, but there's no dialogue. But it is telling a coherent, I think, to the brains of teenagers, story. And it's hitting a lot of the tropes of storytelling that have been really popular over the last 30 years, but condensed into ridiculous micro doses that are just dripped out every week. Like, the escalation of the arms race that happens in this is you get about a season of Dragon Ball's worth of comically over-exaggerated arms escalation in 15 minutes of content in this. Oh, they have lasers. Now we have lasers. Now they have bigger lasers. Now we have a Titan Skibidi Toilet. Now they have a Titan head speaker man. And now there's a Titan television woman. And just always escalating, always growing and adding wrinkles to the world. And it has these weird little interactions where we often see it from the perspective of, say, a normal-sized cameraman, and he might be beating up some Skibidi Toilets, but then a new, big, terrifying Skibidi Toilet appears and makes a horrifying, low-pitched Skibidi-doo, Skibidi-doo. And then our cameraman, our point-of-view character, is about to be killed, and then an even bigger cameraman comes along and kills that Skibidi Toilet and saves him. And then our cameraman finishes the episode by just giving the new cameraman who just arrived a friendly thumbs up.
So I mean, look, this just sounds like the internet's logical progression, sadly. I mean, I like what you were saying there about how it ties in kind of previous obsessions of the internet. That sounds very much like megalophobia, the fear of giant things. And that's been a huge thing on the internet for a while. There's a very strange indie video game set in Russia where the protagonist has to hide from a giant Russian watchman, essentially, as they run around an abandoned Russian town, and they can't make any noise because the giant Russian police officer sits in the middle of the town and looks around, and if you make noise, it kind of finds you and stuff like that. So that megalophobia craze isn't anything new. It was Mondo Media that I was trying to say to you earlier, Michael. Mondo Media did a ton of those weird, non sequitur, bizarre mini cartoons years ago. And the name of the bizarre one that used 3D models in kind of warped and odd ways was called World Doctors.
Heard of it?
It's awful.
I'll give it a watch.
Don't even
dip
your toe in that.
I'm fully caught up on all 175 hours of Skibidi Toilet.
Yeah, look, I'm going to have to dip my toe in, Michael. That sounds insane. Speaking of things that might belong in the toilet now, Michael.
Very good.
We've been watching The Boys.
We have been watching The Boys. Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? It's not great.
Michael, tragically.
Go on.
And this will probably get us cancelled, Michael.
You're probably going to have to put some sort of trigger warning at the start of this episode, Ben.
That's the name of one of Neil Gaiman's short story collections, and the only joke I could think of for this week's grim topic was, I didn't realise he was writing from an autobiographical point of view when he wrote that. Oh. Shame on me. But come here to me.
What?
Season 4 of The Boys isn't great, is it?
People aren't loving it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit what you've said before, Michael, in that it's gone from a fun allegory that lightly parodies America's political climate too. This is America.
This is America, unsubtly.
Unsubtly, I think is the word. I think that's probably the greatest sin of any satire or parody, Michael, is a lack of subtlety.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
At what point does it become, this isn't a satire, lads, you're just doing it. You're just doing the thing you're mocking.
You're just doing it now. I think probably my main criticism of it would be, Michael, and you're welcome to disagree with me, but very much like we feel about the comic book it's based on, it's just fucking mean. It's getting a bit mean.
Go on.
And it's getting a bit grim for grim's sake. I think
Go on.
I suppose I certainly waxed lyrical about Homelander's return to terrifying form 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago now,
yes.
Maybe? We got the elevator scene. He returned to the laboratory that made him. And there was something very simultaneously cathartic but unsettling about that scene. Cathartic in the sense that we got to see an abused boy take revenge on his abusers.
Yes.
And unsettling because every single nerve ending in your body is telling you not to support this man in any way whatsoever. A little bit like fans of Neil Gaiman. And I think I haven't seen the latest episode, Michael, but judging from the backlash it's receiving, I might not want to, because I don't enjoy, as you know, Michael, we here at the podcast, we don't really stand any of the trauma-based tropes for character development, such as fridging or burying your gaze.
Yeah.
You know, or one that we've touched on in a full episode before is the rape revenge trope. You know, those particular tropes can get in the bin as far as this podcast is concerned. But
well, yeah, you say that, but we did like Mandy.
We did like Mandy. Yeah.
And John Wick is very good.
John Wick is very good, and I'm also against murdering dogs, so that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, look, I get your point. And I think what you're talking about is the fact that Huey dresses up as S&M Spider-Man in this episode. Spoilers coming, if you haven't heard them already. But Huey dresses up as S&M Spider-Man to infiltrate BDSM Iron Man's mansion.
Yep,
and
Tech Knight.
Ends up getting himself into a kinky situation. Tech Knight and Ashley of famous Ashley, look at me, Ashley. That Ashley.
Yes.
Who it turns out is a bit of an amateur dominatrix. And he gets sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
In a fairly tame way, I guess.
Sure.
Mostly we see him getting tickled and slapped on the bottom. And if anything more than that happens to him personally, it's implied to happen off screen. Like, we do kind of see Ashley rubbing one off while tickling his feet. And yeah, not great for Huey. But the internet backlash against this one seems to be that it's played for laughs here rather than the horrific and upsetting scene in season 1 where Starlight was, I don't remember, did she have to perform a fellatio on them, or was she assaulted because she wouldn't? I can't remember.
This is where the lines between the comic and the series are starting to blur, because in the comics she is forced to complete the act.
For sure, on multiple members of the set.
Yeah, it's awful. And she's forced to fully go through with the act and complete it. I'm not certain if they were a bit gentler in this and she simply refused, and the way in which she refused caught Homelander's attention and he begins to play a psychological game with her. He stops the act from happening, but he then uses it against her later on.
I've just checked. She does.
Oh, she does? Okay.
Yeah, no, she does.
And very much in the same style, Michael, this has happened in the comic. It's a little bit different. So in this, it's obviously Tech Knight and Ashley. But in the comics, it's Herogasm number 3. And Huey is infiltrating Herogasm. And he is essentially grabbed by Black Noir and sexually assaulted by Black Noir. And that becomes a huge arc for Huey in the comics. And it's kind of done and dusted in 6 issues in a very callous comic book way. But it happens in the comics as well. And again, it's played for laughs here and there, but it is a very unsettling read. Tech Knight is an interesting choice because in the comics, Tech Knight is essentially a pedophile Batman.
Yeah. So in this, they obviously can't go down the pedophile route because that's too extreme for television, and probably for the best because that comic can get right in the bin.
Shit.
Rubbish. So they've kind of, and Neil Gaiman won't have been happy at this, and this has weirdly become the entire topic for this week. But they've substituted out pedophilia for BDSM.
Okay.
So they've made him a masochist. And again, the interesting thing here is Huey is in disguise as someone who has consented to all of this. And he can't withdraw his consent because that will break his cover.
And he'll get killed.
And that does happen in the end. And obviously he doesn't get killed, he gets rescued. But once his cover is revealed, he's threatened with much worse torture. But I don't think anything actually happens. So the traumatic thing that happens to him happens in a BDSM scenario that the other 2 people think is consensual.
Yeah. I think maybe what the outrage is, it's not necessarily around the notion of, well, I'm not sure how you would label that notion, but I think the issue is a show that has gone out of its way in the past to tactfully handle sexual assault and portray the very real trauma that comes from that has all of a sudden, in its 4th and arguably most outrageous season, gone, Huey got molested. That's fucking gas.
He got tickled and Ashley creamed one off on him.
And I think that might be the issue that fans are having with this one. And that's nothing new, Michael. Male sexual assault for laughs is a pretty common trope in not in comedies anymore, because we have moved on a little bit as a society, but there would have been once a male double standard for male rape that would have been played very much for laughs in comedies. One of the examples of that most famously being The Wedding Crashers, Michael, with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn is repeatedly sexually assaulted by members of the family that he then marries into.
So that's fine, yeah. Sure, and why would you complain?
And it's fine, And yeah, that happens. There's a few other ones as well where that happens. It was a very common thing in early 2000s comedies.
No, especially. And earlier. No, not especially. It's always been.
It's always been there.
Especially, okay, maybe more like a man being sexually assaulted by a woman. Ha ha ha! Isn't that hilarious? But even going back, like, if you think about all the prison jokes and all the don't drop the soap jokes, men being sexually assaulted has always been a joke rather than something serious. But again, it's murky waters in this about consent, because the 2 people who do it to him, one of them very much gets his comeuppance and is very much a bad guy.
Yes.
But the actual sexual assault that happens, he thinks it's consensual, the guy who's doing it. Like a 63-year-old Neil Gaiman, funnily enough. You heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. Neil Gaiman is Tech Knight. That's the big reveal here on the podcast. Look, it's tricky, isn't it? I personally think the tone of the show has shifted massively. We've gone from a crew of underdogs who were up against a significant threat to Western society in the form of hypercapitalism to everybody's fucking awful, and how can we
push the envelope a bit this week, and what can we do? And not that wasn't always there as a glimmer, but I think it's important to emphasize that in previous seasons it was a glimmer. We got very much the implication of awful things occasionally, with one or two scenes of outrageous behavior per season. This season seems to just be, fuck it, we've got one more season left, let's fucking give it the welly.
Balls to the wall. Get there for Dean Morgan in here. Benjamin.
Yeah.
Speaking of balls to the wall, since we're about to go on our 2-week break, I decided to use some of the free time I had and catch up on movies we've missed.
Oh, very good.
Would you believe? The best thing about this is none of these are going to involve sexual assault, which is fabulous.
The thing I really ask of any media I consume is please don't have too many depictions of sexual assault.
Ideal.
The most autistic thing about me, Michael, and I say that as a non-diagnosed autistic person, but a fully diagnosed dyspraxic person as on the spectrum.
Yeah.
The
self-diagnosed autistic person, I believe, is the term you're looking for.
Yeah, but in this particular case, my dyspraxia does put me on the spectrum. But the most autistic thing about me is, Michael, I thoroughly, strongly, 100% believe that sex is not a necessary part of any plot. I'm fully against it. I fucking hate this stuff.
You're all Johnny Sexless, are you? That's very interesting. That's,
Johann Sebastian Sexless over here.
Johann Sebastian Sexless. That's very interesting, Benjamin, and that's something we should dig into sometime in a very emotional podcast episode. That would be a change of tone for this podcast, because I don't necessarily agree with that. That might be a generational thing as well. But look, this is not the episode to do it, because I think we've managed to get through 2 BDSM-themed sexual assault topics without making a complete balls of it. So let's not go down that road. And I don't know. We'll find out in a couple of years when some of this gets clipped out. When you're running for president and someone clips out you saying, I have no problem with sexual assault.
Yeah, and I'll be on a campaign somewhere. Anyway, come here to me. Michael, you've been watching things we missed.
I've been watching things we missed, and shamefully, Benjamin, one of the things we missed was Abigail, which we only realised after the fact had deep Irishman sauce connections. For example, the young lady who plays Abigail is an Irish woman sauce. And Benjamin, although the film I don't think is set in Ireland, it was 100% filmed in Ireland. For example, when the young girl, Dracula's daughter, is performing her creepy daughter ballet right at the start, guess where she's doing it?
In Bray.
No, Benjamin, in the Board Gosh Energy Theatre.
Fuck.
I saw those big red pokey sticks and I went, that's the Board Gosh Energy Theatre. And then they have a car chase, Ben. They have a car chase about 20 minutes later, after they've driven all over the place and they're trying to escape some pursuers. And the car chase, just down the canal. Not the canal, down the river, down the quays. It goes past the convention centre, Ben. And I was looking at it going, that's only 5 minutes away from where they picked her up. They could have just turned left there instead of going on that big jaunt they went on.
Insane. How did we miss that, Michael? How did we miss that?
Oh, shameful. Absolute shameful of us not to have supported this. It was filmed in the Guinness Manor, Ben.
For fuck's sake, Michael.
Absolute shameful stuff from us to how much we neglected to cover
Abigail.
I forgot what it was called. Anyway, it's the thing about Abigail is, here's the thing about Abigail. Have you seen the trailer for it?
Yes.
You've seen it?
Oh.
There's not a twist or a reveal or a turn left unspoiled by that trailer. And it suffers, obviously, from the fact that its central conceit kind of has to be spoiled to promote it. But
that's not great.
Have I ever told you about the first time I saw From Dusk Till Dawn?
No, you haven't. Do tell me more.
Benjamin, the first time I saw From Dusk Till Dawn, I was in my teens. And I thought I was watching a Quentin Tarantino, George Clooney, quippy gangsters on the lam in Mexico movie.
Gig. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Salma Hayek was doing a big sexy dance, Benjamin, and I was a teenager. And I was like, this film just keeps getting better and better. This is my favourite gangster film. And then Guess what happened?
Salma Hayek isn't doing a big sexy dance. She's doing a big sexy, I'm going to eat you.
She's a fucking vampire, Ben, and they're all vampires. And then it's a vampire film. And Abigail works on that same conceit. But very sadly, we know straight away from the very beginning, because every single piece of marketing told us
Yeah.
what the big twist is going to be. And I would love to have seen this I would love to be 15 in 10 years' time and catch this late night on Channel 4.
Oh, yeah, good old Film 4 late night. What is this?
Yeah, just put it on fucking Friday evening. I've got nothing better to do because I'm a sweaty teenager. And I'm just going, it's a heist kidnap movie. Oh, yeah, I'll watch this. There's Melissa Barrera. She was in Scream before Zionists ruined her career. And you'd probably really, really, really enjoy it.
Probably.
Because everything else about it is good.
Oh, well, that's pretty good, isn't it?
The characters are good. The acting is good. The performances are great. The setup is fabulous. The gore is incredible. It's brisk and to the point. There's nothing extraneous about it. It doesn't get into a mythology overly. It's a 90-ish minute horror gore fest surprise movie. And I think the marketing was the thing that really worked against it. Because Benjamin, to be a teenager watching this unbidden on a weekend night on Channel 4, chef's kiss.
Mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah. I also saw Furiosa.
Go on.
Which is not brisk, let me
Oh.
fucking tell you.
Okay.
Furiosa is a long-ass film.
How long is it?
I don't know. It felt like about 6 years. It's broken into 5 acts.
Go on.
Again, look, we missed it. I didn't see it in cinema. It didn't do very well in cinema. It didn't really get its audience.
Okay.
It is good. It is undoubtedly a good film.
Well, that's good.
To my mind, it would have benefited from coming out before Fury Road.
It's a classic prequel too late.
And I think that's why it failed, to be honest. I know there was a lot of sodgy backlash to this, going, we don't want to see women Mad Max, we want to see Mad Max. And I don't think that's why it failed. I think this failed because it was a prequel too late. It's great world building. Mm-hmm. I was watching this thinking, as soon as this is over, I'm going to look up a map of Australia in the Mad Max timeline and see where all of these places are and see how far apart they are. Because Australia in Mad Max is horrible. And in Mad Max 1, it's still more or less Australia. And I do not understand how it degenerated so quickly. These films do not make sense as a coherent 5-film story.
Set. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Like, the world that Furiosa lives in is generations deep into a post-apocalyptic nightmare. And yet, Mad Max is still in his early 30s.
Always.
As he was back when it was still a functioning Australian society.
Yeah.
You know, this does not make sense. But it doesn't have to make sense because it's a fabulous world. The action is great. The characters are cool and gross and horrible. Great performance from, what's his name, Ugly Thor, Chris Hemsworth. He wears prosthetics to ugly him up, which again I think is unfair and taking roles away from ugly actors.
Yeah. Steve Buscemi is starving.
Steve Buscemi, Benjamin. Have you ever seen a picture of young Steve Buscemi?
Oh, he's
Steve
very
Buscemi
handsome
was
man.
a smoke show.
He was a smoke show
man.
once upon a time, Michael. Back when he was a
Yeah,
fireman.
yeah.
Can you imagine a jacked, svelte Steve Buscemi saving you from a fire? Fucking swoon.
Oh, God. Oh,
Fucking
Jesus.
swoon.
Holy God. I meant ugly actors like, say, the likes of you and me, Ben.
Oh,
We could have been in Mad Max.
The normal people. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they've put a shitload of prosthetics on Chris Hemsworth to make him still much more attractive than me.
That's the ultimate insult. Because I've seen interviews with him being like, oh yeah, I really wanted to really wanted to come across as a very different man. I'm like, you look exactly the same, Chris, but you've got a slightly bigger nose. What the fuck are you on about? And he was just like,
this is insulting.
I think at one
Insulting
point
to
in one of the
proper
interviews
uggos.
I watched, he was like, yeah, it was really interesting to play such an unattractive character. And I was like, you didn't, you fucking lying face.
Shut
And fucking
fuck up, Chris Hemsworth.
and Anya Taylor-Joy was there next to him going, it was such a transformation. And I was like, what the fuck are you both on about?
Look at him!
Handsome man.
Look at him! Look at his lovely hair, and his big bushy beard, and his abs, his
And he's
abdominals.
still jacked.
Fucking shambles. It's a very good film. I don't think it's as good as Fury Road. It's not as tight a story as Fury Road because it follows the life story of Furiosa from the moment she's kidnapped to the moment she loads those 5 wives onto the truck, and therefore is a little bit meandering and a little bit disjointed. A little.
So is Tom Hardy
like
in
it's
it?
a good. No.
No.
Because remember, she already has the wives when she meets him.
That's true. That's true.
We do see the back of his head at one stage, portrayed by his stunt performer, but it's less than a cameo.
Less than a cameo.
But look, it's a good movie. It deserved to do better. I like the idea of further films in the Mad Max world.
Yeah.
I still don't think a prequel about one of the characters was the right move. I would have
why would you
preferred a
prequel?
complete standalone.
Yeah. I think the great flaw in prequels like that, Michael, is you lose the wonderful sense of joy as an audience when you see a character get their comeuppance in what was the prior film but is now a sequel in the context of the chronology you're building. So, for example, Michael, and spoilers for Mad Max Fury Road, but Immortan Joe dies in Fury Road, and a lot of the characters get their comeuppance, and it's a very good feeling by the end of Fury Road, because you've had enough of them by the end of Fury Road. You're like, you're a piece of shit, man. I just wish you'd fuck off and die. And I don't know, I always think it's weird to be like, oh, remember all these guys? Because you're not going to get that relief in this film, you know?
Well, you do, because Dementus, Chris Hemsworth, is the baddie. And Immortan Joe is nearly the not quite as bad option compared to Dementus. Immortan Joe is nearly the rational one compared to Dementus. But that was kind of going to be my point, and we have beaten a dead horse on why prequels are not good things here on Sure Look, Sure Listen, the podcast that takes a pop culture. But it's just dawned on me that one of the real fucking difficulties of making a good prequel is a good prequel. No matter how good the prequel is, Benjamin, it's a fucking sequel. Right?
Yes.
Because the audience have already seen the others.
Yes.
And they have expectations, and they have expectations of the characters, and they have expectations of the world.
Yes.
And one of the things that Hollywood insists on doing is having escalation. So the sequel always has to be bigger stakes and more dramatic and more exciting than the previous film. And the problem is when you do a prequel, then you make the original, which is now the sequel, smaller stakes and less important. So, like, by the time you finished watching this movie, then you're thinking, oh, her beef with Immortan Joe and Max Rotansky, whatever, Mel Gibson, is pretty minor, actually. This is just a small little side quest that happened to her on the way home from her much more epic saga that we just didn't know about.
That we never.
So
we
it
didn't
diminish. You know? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anytime you make a prequel, you have to diminish the original.
Which
That's
is shite.
all the prequel can do. Yeah. Unless you make a smaller scale prequel, which I've seen sometimes, and they can be very good. But I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, nor can I, Michael. But it's interesting that you brought up how awful Australia is as a place in this dystopia.
Oh, one of the worst places.
One of the worst places. Why do you think that is, Michael? Why do you think George Miller went, this is fucking awful, I'm going to make it into a movie?
This place is fucked, mate. First of all, right, I would argue, because I know we're talking about dystopia or that topia, society and storytelling's obsession with dystopian and utopian societies. I would argue that the society of Mad Max is neither dystopian nor utopian. It's post-apocalyptic.
Go on.
This is a society that has collapsed. This is basically not a society.
Yes.
And I would say that a dystopia is a functioning society which is just horrific and oppressive to the people. So I don't consider the likes of Mad Max or any kind of post-the-bomb movies to be dystopias. When I think of dystopias, I think of... I was leaving a gap. You might jump in.
Oh, no, I don't jump into things anymore, Michael. When you're talking about dystopias, you're thinking of something like Children of Men.
Yes. Yeah. Like Total Recall.
Like Total Recall.
Not Total Recall. The other one. Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. It's there on the list, Michael. You're thinking of something like Altered Carbon or The Matrix.
1984.
Or 1984. Or perhaps that most classic of Matt Damon films that everybody loved, Elysium.
The rich people are on the space station. The Hunger Games, Benjamin.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? The Hunger Games, Michael, for example. Don't worry, Michael. I will edit this so that it seems like I jumped in with a handy example and we didn't awkwardly just go, what do you want me to do? What?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Very,
that
very
was
good.
my fault.
No, it's entirely mine, Michael. I should have been a better co-host to you.
Go on.
That's all I'm saying. But it is interesting, Michael, how we lean one way or the other. You and I have taken a look several times over the course of this podcast history, and it is extensive, Michael. Exhausting, some might say. But we have taken a look a few times, and we've come up with different ways of looking at things. We've looked at solar punk, Michael. We've looked at hopecore. We've looked at positive kind of hopes for the future. But it does seem like when we watch sci-fi on television or on film, and it does seem to be particularly prevalent within, I suppose, TV and film. When we watch it, everything ends up being awful. Dystopia is the flavour of the last 6 decades of future society films.
Okay. Go on.
Arguably not in the case of something like The Planet of the Apes, where it's a dystopia for about 6 living beings and a bit of a utopia for the others.
Yeah, it's a utopia for the apes. The apes are loving it.
They're fucking loving it. But, like, outside of that, Michael, things get a bit grim a lot of the time.
Go on.
And I did a bit of digging into this, Michael, because in classic Ben fashion, and yes, I am referring to myself in the third person, I misunderstood the topic this week, Michael. And I thought you wanted to understand why it is that we tend to lean as a society into dystopia over utopia in our fiction.
Well, no. Okay, let's talk about this for a second.
Yes.
I wanted to discuss whether the current leaning in society leads to more dystopian or utopian depictions of future societies in our fiction. For example, the ancient Greeks, now obviously they weren't producing popular media on the same scale as we do, by even a fraction, and even then what has survived. But it seems to be that their, and there was no such thing as science fiction obviously, but their depictions of the future or their depictions of alternative societies tended towards utopian.
They did.
And throughout history and throughout science fiction, there has been quite often a leaning in, particularly in the written word, towards having a lot of utopian fiction.
Yes.
And often in early sci-fi would often be about things like Mars attacking or you know, visiting alien worlds, but Earth would often be portrayed as somewhat of a utopia.
Yeah, that's one that always kind of interests me, Michael, isn't it? It's funny that we're either the insignificant ape people that the aliens underestimate, or we are the only creatures in the galaxy that understand empathy and not enslaving people.
Yeah, we're like, okay, I'm gonna cut across your point a little bit, I think, with
Go
this.
ahead.
So feel free to steer it back on point yourself in a few minutes. But the seminal, I feel, obviously Sir Thomas More's Utopia is where, I don't know if it's where the phrase comes from, I think it is, but the paragon of sci-fi utopias for 30 years of popular culture was the Federation of Planets
Yes.
in Star Trek.
Yes.
That in Star Trek, Starfleet was the quasi-military, quasi-militia exploratory arm of the Federation of Planets. And the Federation of Planets was a utopia. In the original series, they had men, women, different... I don't even like this term in discussing it about sci-fi. Different races of humanity working together. They had black people and Asian people and American people and Russians and the Scottish, and they were all together on spaceships. They had aliens on the spaceships. They had Mr. Spock, and the Federation that they lived in was a utopia, to the point where they often genuinely didn't understand prejudice. They met aliens, and the aliens were thinly veiled representations of some Earth problem. Now, very thinly veiled, Ben. But
Yes.
the people on the starship were like, but why do you hate each other? Why would you hate each other for something as trivial as the colour of your skin? Or, what do you mean you wouldn't allow women to have these opportunities? How farcical.
How
And
strange.
they're often borderline insulted by these aliens, and all they get from the Federation, the Starfleet crew, is a raised eyebrow, or a like, you'll learn someday when you join us in enlightenment. And that continued into Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
So there's a very famous episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where Captain Picard gets to the bottom of a conspiracy in Starfleet, where some of the admirals and captains seem to be up to something. But that's not very Starfleet now, is it, Ben?
No, it's not. They shouldn't be up to anything. They should all be happy.
And they are. They've been infected by brain bugs. The
Oh.
only discord or breakdown of peace within the Federation of Planets is because of outside infiltration.
Yes,
And
they've been
Picard-
scuppered from within by an outsider.
By an outsider. And Picard goes to great lengths to point out that the Federation of Planets is a post-need society. There's no such thing as hunger. There's no such thing as poverty. There's no such thing as disparity between rich and poor. There's no such thing as wealth. There's no such thing as possessions. People don't own things. Because why would you own things in a world where an instant transporter can make
Sorts
your
it all
every
out.
need?
Yeah.
Everything you need. You need food, you just walk up to a machine and say, tea, Earl Grey, hot. You want a new transformer, you walk to a machine and say, transformer please, and it goes and gives you one. I mean, it's a post-need society, and that continues in Star Trek throughout all of the original series and 99% of the Next Generation.
Not the movies, though.
Yeah, pretty much the movies.
The J.J. Abrams ones?
No! That's the whole point. That's the whole point, Benjamin.
I was teeing you up, Michael, you son of a bitch.
I didn't know if you were teeing me up or you were just ignorant.
No, I was teeing you up.
So the kind of the beginning of the end for Star Trek being a utopian society is Deep Space Nine. Which this sounds weird to say, the second spin-off of Star Trek. Only the fucking second, Ben.
Yeah.
I remember Deep Space Nine being new. That's how old I am. And Deep Space Nine is very much not a utopia. It's a frontier town. That's what Deep Space Nine is. Deep Space
Right.
Nine is the wild, wild west of the Federation.
Okay.
But it introduced a few concepts, like the Maquis. Are you
What's
familiar
that?
with the term Maquis? Ben?
What's
It's
that?
It's a French term for a resistance fighter.
Okay,
And
what are
the
they doing?
Maquis, the Maquis are essentially Federation terrorists
Oh no.
who break away from the Federation and use terrorist tactics to fight against the Cardassians.
So they're the Irish.
And kind of, they're like the Irish or the French resistance in World War II. There's lots of different aspects to them, but they do not make sense in a utopian federation.
Nice.
And my big question then was, that was kind of the beginning of the end of the Federation as a utopia. Because
Right.
we start to see Starfleet doing some dodgy dealings. We see Benjamin Sisko doing some dodgy dealings. We see Starfleet has some secret divisions who do enjoy a little bit of psy-ops and a little bit of, not great carry-on.
Yeah.
And we start to see there's politics within the Federation, and it kind of gradually breaks down the idea that the Federation is a genuine sci-fi utopia. A post-need, post-want, post-discrimination, post-everything society.
Come here to me. When we talk about that as a Deep Space Nine being the splinter or the schism in the shining image of the Federation, when did Deep Space Nine first air?
96?
Ah, okay.
95?
So that's very interesting, Michael. So there's a few different things that I find fascinating by your breakdown. First of all, thank you very much. Very concise, very thorough, very helpful in understanding the topic of this week. I wish I'd asked you sooner.
93, excuse me, 93.
93, right. So who's in Deep Space Nine? Is that Jane, Captain Jane?
Captain Jane.
Captain Jane.
Fucking embarrassment. Do you mean Captain Catherine Janeway? Is that who you mean?
No, I
I
mean
can't
Captain
believe you're on
Jane.
Captain Jane. Yes, it's Captain Jane. Yeah,
From the
it's
famous 90s song Ayo Captain Jane.
Commander Benjamin Sisko, I think you mean.
Yeah, okay. It's Commander Benjamin Sisko. Right. So that was 90s. So, I mean, look, it's probably important to note the general mood of society around the time that Star Trek first reared its head.
Go on.
And we've talked about this as well on the podcast before, Michael. And to be honest, we've been doing this for 7 years, so a little bit of overlap is probably to be expected. But
Yeah.
we've spoken about the idea of retrofuturism and a hope for the future. And that genuinely existed in the world at one point. There was a feeling in the zeitgeist around the late 1950s, early 1960s, that everything was going to be all right.
Fucking
we
hippies,
were
Benjamin. Fucking free love.
fucking free love, baby. And there was a genuine sense, probably in America more than anywhere else, but we can get into that another time. There was a genuine sense or need for the belief that life was going to get better. Things can only get better, as the fella says. And that was the genuine belief at that time. And that's when Star Trek emerged. And this idea of a space utopia where everyone got along and a post-need society was inevitable aligned very clearly with the goals of nation states in terms of the vision of themselves they wanted to portray to the world.
And Gene Roddenberry was a hippie.
And he was a big, dirty fucking hippie. Father of one of the most seminal sci-fi shows of all time was a hippie, which was very common in the 1960s. It's absolutely
That's when
fine.
Neil Gaiman's from.
Fucking, we'll get into that another time, Michael. But it's
I don't know if
interesting.
we will then.
No, I think this is it for us. Neil Gaiman's probably never getting a shout out in the podcast again. But come here to me. It's interesting that then sours with the age of cynicism that is the 1990s.
Oh, go on.
Because the 1990s can be seen, Michael, as a watershed moment for the previous 30 years. So, yes?
Yeah, dude, go on. I'm here,
All
Ben.
right, sorry, Jesus. What happened was, Michael, that exuberant growth of the economy, that relentless capitalist ideal of we'll give you more, conditions will get better, you'll make more money, you'll be able to provide for your family even easier, blah, blah, blah. Suddenly, there was the great sphincter tightening of the economy, Michael, and that golden vision of things can only get better tarnished right fucking fast. Because
this is in America you're talking about, is it?
This is
We were all
primarily in America,
elasticated tracksuits.
but sadly, in America, Michael, is where we take a lot of our fictional cues from.
Oh
unfortunately.
yeah. I'm not criticizing this time.
They are the dominant, unfortunate at the moment, the dominant cultural narrative that we take in, for
Skibidi
better or
Toilet.
worse. It's worse. It's worse. But come here to me. That began to tarnish, and the world began to wake up and realize and become more politically aware of the fact that America was less of a land of the free and home of the brave, and more of an industrial complex running heedlessly throughout the world, taking what it needed here, there, and everywhere.
Are you dragging this back to capitalism? Are
Michael,
you
I
dragging
don't
this back to
need
your
to.
ongoing grudge with capitalism?
Michael, this is the best part. I don't need to, because it's fundamentally rooted in the early days of the neoliberal idea of capitalism, hence the post-need society, hence the manufactured propaganda dream that was fed to us throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s, which came crashing down in the late 90s. Fucking fascinating stuff, Michael. But anyway, look, doesn't matter. It's interesting that you say that is how it happened for Star Trek, because I would argue that you could map the same journey through sci-fi, through fantasy, through many other things, Michael, in that idea of moving towards a darker future society. There are many, many examples of this. But one of the interesting things that I think you also pointed out is you're absolutely right in saying that the Greeks used to have a much more positive outlook on the world. And it's funny because when we adapt a lot of those ancient myths today in our fiction, it's usually the bad thing that was once defeated coming back to cause havoc for the Greek gods or something like that. I think of things like Hercules from Disney in 1997, where the Titans come back. In Greek mythology, Michael, when the Titans are done away with, that's fucking it. It's done. It's over.
We've progressed.
Kaputski.
We've progressed as a society and a culture where things are improving. Here's the thing, though, Ben.
Yeah.
I don't mean to belittle your aggressive stance on neoliberal capitalism,
Yeah,
because
go
I'm
on.
no great fan of capitalism myself, despite
You're not.
the room of shame that I'm currently in. But I don't think commercialism and capitalism necessarily are the same thing, by the way. But that's neither here nor there. My take on this is slightly less political and slightly more the craft of storytelling.
I'm glad that
I
you
think-
recognise, Michael, that all capitalism is political. But there you go. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. I think, Benjamin, that it is much harder to write a compelling story in a utopia than a dystopia.
Yes, almost impossible.
And especially if, and this has been the huge swing in American entertainment in the last 20 years, especially if your story has to reflect a real world American issue.
Which it often does.
How? Yeah, and it always has. Like, this is part of storytelling. Storytelling reflects real world issues. In that famous episode of Star Trek, they meet a planet full of aliens who are black skin on one side and white skin on the other side, and they're divided right down the middle. And they hate each other, the people on this planet. And the crew of the Enterprise they can't even understand why they hate each other. And eventually one of the aliens explains, "Oh, I'm left on the right side and black on the left side. And he's black on the left side and white on the right side. So we
Silly.
hate each other." And the Star Trek people are like, "That's so silly. Stop, knock it off now." I've never even noticed that Uhura is a different skin tone to me.
Never
I'm
even
going to give her the
noticed.
kiss. But I mean, that TV and movie stories are always going to reflect society to some degree. But one of the bigger criticisms about Star Trek Picard was they literally travelled back in time to more or less now to deal with immigration.
Shitebags. Shitebags.
Like, show us the utopia. You keep showing us aspects of the Federation that are awful, like drug addiction is back
Boo.
and
Boo.
poverty is back.
I hate that shit because I like my escapism firmly escapey. But I guess it gets harder to pull away from that.
Yeah, so sorry, that was my point. I didn't mean to complain about modern American politics and TV again. My point was that it's harder to tell compelling stories. Not impossible,
but
it's harder in a utopia because where is your threat? Where is your momentum in the story going to come from if the threat to the society or the threat to the characters always has to come from outside sources?
Yeah. It's a hard thing to pull off. It's a hard thing to pull off, Michael. I think arguably one of the best things about the next generation is, while yes, they absolutely did visit other planets and that kind of thing, there were an awful lot of bottle episodes on the ship. And I don't mean bottle episodes as in the traditional thing of a single set for the entire duration of the thing, but the ship was often the set of
setting.
A lot of those things.
The ship is the setting of most Next Generation episodes.
Yeah, so it's a much easier thing to kind of work out those ideologies and things like that and bring a threat into the perfect microcosm of the ship, I suppose, as opposed to the Federation as a whole.
Yeah. Where the threat can almost be seen like a virus that's encompassed in the T cell of the ship.
Exactly.
So the ship is like a containment body for this awful aspect of some society. And it's encompassed in this bubble of utopia and therefore sorted out in half an episode.
It is the white blood cell of the Federation.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes outside the body and goes and solves other problems. Imagine if all of my white blood cells, Ben, could just flood out of my body and solve racism.
And so
maybe it wouldn't be my white blood cells, Ben. It might be some of my other ones.
Hopefully it'd be your mixed blood cells, Michael. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen.
On that note.
On that bizarre note, Skibidi Toilet, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think of it? There's a few different places you can get in touch and let us know. You can find us on the interwebs at www.seomrabeag.com, SEOMRABEAG.com.
It means tiny room, but in Irish. Kind of.
Mick is too busy watching TikToks to enjoy the closing parts of this particular show.
I just got a message, a Skibidi Toilet alert.
New Skibidi Toilet lore dropped. You can also find us on our other website, ladies and gentlemen, podcast.acast.com. That's much more up to date with all the latest news and goss from Sure Look, Sure Listen. You can find us.
We should probably wrap up that other one, Ben.
Yeah, we can probably shut that down at some point, Michael. You can find us, ladies and gentlemen, on the interwebs at Instagram. They hate us. They're not showing us anywhere else, but do sign up there if you want. Or you can go over to our much more successful TikTok channel, which is linked all down below in the description there. You can click on any of those. But ladies and gentlemen, I have some dire news for you.
What is it?
We're not going to be here for 2 weeks.
Oh, we're off on holidays.
We're off on holidays. There's going to be a void where we once sat in your heart, ladies and gentlemen. You should probably get that checked out. But fear not. There will be plenty of little reels, snippets, and ongoing daily content on all of our social channels. Or
there might not be.
Or there might not be. Just hop up on the Discord, ladies and gentlemen, and see what we're up to. That is linked down below in the description. It's getting a revamp this week, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't discussed it with Michael, but he's going to be abroad, so I can do whatever I want.
Well, I still have Discord, Ben, and I'm not abroad yet.